everybody. Thank you for being here. I am Lisa Schlaff. We are talking about the pedagogy of Ukimta. For those of you who don't know what Ukimta is, we're going to define it in about a minute, so don't worry about that. I am speaking both as a Gemara learner and as a Gemara teacher today, so that's the pedagogy piece, but this is applicable to those of us who are just learners and not teachers. A bit of an introduction. Often, what I find as a teacher of Gemara, what my students struggle with the most is not kind of the language, but much more the methodology. How the Gemara tends to solve contradictions. What drashot are doing in the Gemara? What is the meaning behind certain drashot? And what I would like to do today is pick one particular device that the Gemara uses, which is the Ukimta, and talk about how we make sense of that. How do we think about when the Gemara is making an Ukimta, when the Gemara uses this particular kind of device that it uses to solve certain kinds of contradictions? How do we understand what the Gemara is trying to do? Okay? So before we get in, we're going to do that through looking at one particular small sugya in Bava Kama very closely. And the antecedents of this sugya. Okay, let's define for a minute what we are talking about, and let's do that before we get into the sugya. Let's do that with a sort of run-of-the-mill kind of example of a contradiction outside of the Gemara. Okay, so we are in a high school. I teach in a high school. I'm going to give you a high school example. Okay, so an Ukimta is when you have two sources of equal authority that contradict each other. Okay, so very conveniently for the example that I'm going to give you, I work in a high school that has two principals. Okay, so there's Rabbi Kroll and Rabbi Hartstein. So we're going to do a little 2-minute example. Here, Rabbi H and Rabbi K. Okay, so Rabbi H says, students, excuse my handwriting, I have terrible handwriting. Students, I'm not going to write very much, just type it. Students may not use the elevator. Okay, Rabbi K, a man with equal authority to Rabbi H, says, shockingly, students may use the elevator. This is what we would call a contradiction of two sources of equal authority. Okay, what options does the Gemara have for solving this contradiction? Go. Yeah.
So there's two different cases of two different times.
Okay, give me an example. So let's play it out.
During the day, when you first come in, you can't use the elevator, but during the day, you are allowed to move from class to class.
Okay, so we could say, when Rabbi Hartstein said students may not use the elevator, he was talking about when you first enter the building. He was talking about after school. Okay? Before or after school? Before or after school. And when Rabbi K said students may use the elevator, he was talking about during the school day. Okay, they were both talking about different times. Good. Okay, so that's one option we have to solve the contradiction. Give me some other options we have to solve the contradiction. Go ahead.
They don't agree with each other?
We have disagreement. Why are we bothering to solve the contradiction, right? They disagree. Good. Okay? Which might be problematic for the actual running of the school. Okay? But, like, you could just leave the disagreement. Yeah.
Okay. One example might be students may not quote regular non-disabled. Students may not use the elevator.
Good.
But people with wheelchairs or walkers or canes or whatever.
Good. So,
but if you don't have that extra information, this is like what do you call it? Irresistible object.
yes. Yes.
Irresistible force.
Yes.
Immovable object.
Yes.
And
Good.
somebody, okay, flip a coin. I like this guy better than that
Good.
one. I like
Excellent.
this one. He's better.
Okay, so you're suggesting a different way of solving the contradiction, which is to say, let's say, right, assuming...
Qualifying only one of the two authorities.
Example. Yes, 100%. Meaning, well, here we're qualifying as well, okay? Here we're qualifying based on time, okay? And what you're suggesting is actually don't qualify the statements based on time, qualify one of the statements based on who it's referring to,
Yeah.
okay? So when we say students may not use the elevator, I'm talking about students without disabilities, let's say, okay? When we say students may use the elevator, I'm talking about students who cannot walk up the 6 flights of stairs. Okay, so we have some kind of sense here, right? We could say they disagree, right? We could try and redefine one of the statements. Okay, when the Gemara uses an Ukimta is from the word really lahakim, right? Which means to uphold, okay? We are upholding one of the statements to be something slightly different than we might have thought it was otherwise, okay? And which is essentially what the Gemara would do, okay? The Gemara does not like to leave the contradictions be. What the Gemara is going to do here is to say, actually, right, when Rabbi Harkstart said that students may not use the elevator, he was actually saying they may not use the elevator before or after school. Rabbi Kroll said students may use the elevator. He actually meant students may use the elevator during school. Okay? Now, going with that example, we're making an active decision here. We are preferencing one of the statements. Which statement are we actually preferencing? We're preferencing Rabbi Kroll. Okay? Because if I just read students may use the elevator, what's my assumption? My assumption is we're talking about during the school day, right?
Yes.
Like when I'm just reading these statements, regular person reading these statements, I am assuming that we are talking about during the school day, okay? So anytime, my point is, in using this example, is just to make the point that we are actually, there's some source sheets in the back.
Okay.
Is that we are talking about a regular case, and that any time the Gemara is making an Ukimta, it is actually making an active decision, okay? It could have made a different decision. We could have decided, actually, that we wanted our baseline case to not be students can use the elevator, that we wanted our baseline case to be students may not use the elevator, and the exception is actually that students actually can't use the elevator during the day, and the exception is students can use the elevator after school, okay? So we have to think about an Ukimta as a very deliberate choice that Chazal are making. And what we have to do is kind of excavate that choice. Why are they making the choice that they're making? Can we actually try and understand that choice and have it not think about it as something that is totally random? Okay? And that's what I want to do, looking at one particular sugya today. The obvious problem here, right, is when Rabbi Kroll said students may use the elevator, what did he not say?
During the school day.
He didn't say, like, if I'm just reading this, it seems like,
He didn't say
right?
what type of students.
He didn't say, right,
when.
there's no specificity here, okay? So when we have the Gemara coming back and trying to redefine a Tanaitic statement, right, and say it's actually, well, they really meant it only on this day, or they really meant it only applying to this person, how do we actually explain that in a way that makes sense, okay? How do we understand the specificity and what they were trying to do? The specificity to which they are trying to attribute these statements, if the statements, when we originally read them, do not seem like they're referring to that instance, okay? That's what we're going to do today. We're going to take a look at it within one particular example in the Gemara. Yes?
So when does the Gemara sort of give up and just say this machloek is, this holds for the Rabbanit, this holds for the Pedagogy? When do they give up?
So,
not try to establish the Ukimta. If they can't establish the Ukimta?
So sometimes they will do that, right? That's a very, very big, large question about, when exactly. I don't know if there's specific rules for exactly when they will do this and exactly when they will do that. What I'm interested in looking at is when we look at Ukimtot, is there a way in a particular Ukimta of not just saying this is arbitrary? Okay, of trying to understand, and look, sometimes you have to sort of throw up your hands and say, actually, I cannot figure this one out, okay? The example that I want to look at today, I think, is an example where we can really excavate it and try and understand why they are trying to say what they're saying. So that's, I can't make like broad statements based on that, but I want to do that through one particular example. Yeah?
So you were saying that preferencing one end of the one position over the other is like what's happening when the Gemara uses an Ukimta. That's not. Are you saying that that's not a rejection of the other one entirely, or is it, or?
I think it depends on the case. It depends on the case. So let's look at this particular example, right? Very often it is a rejection of the other one. It doesn't have to be. You're right that it's not entirely a rejection of the other one, but that's an excellent question. Let's look at this in the context. Does everybody have a source sheet? Great. There's some more in the back if we don't. Okay, so let's do this here. Where's my stuff? Give me 1 second. That's all good. Oh, you did. Great.
And maybe this is yours too.
That's mine also. Perfect. Wonderful. Okay, let's get going here. All right, I'm gonna read in the Hebrew/Arabic. The translation is here. I'll translate sort of off the cuff as we go along, and please continue to ask questions. So here's the Gemara. This is in Bava Kama. This is in a series of Mishnayot, which talk about defining the role of public space. Okay, so here we go. There are two people who are traveling in the public domain. We have two cases here. Okay, it's possible to actually read this as three cases. For the purposes of this today, we're going to read it as two cases because I think that's the shot. Okay, we have two people who are going on their way in Rishut Harabim. One person is running and one person is walking. If you're an SAR High School student, this might be like vaguely familiar somewhere. I'm seeing a few smiles of recognition, which I love. Okay, or two people are running, and they damage each other. Okay, they are both patur, they are both exempt. All right, this is classic Mishnah. It gives us the case law. It gives us what the halacha is. It does not give us any explanation or rationale. Okay, why are they both patur in either of these cases? Give me a rationale. Why are they both patur? Two people are running, they run into each other. One person's running, one person's walking, they run into each other. We don't hold anybody responsible for damages. Why not? Yeah?
Because no one has intent of damaging the other person.
Because what?
No one has intent of damaging the other person.
No one has intent to damage the other person. You're responsible for damages you do without intent? No. Okay, yes, you are. All right, yeah?
They would both have to pay each other the same amount.
Okay, maybe they would both have, maybe like the damages are going to cancel each other out. I'm going to give you a hard time. What if the damages don't cancel each other out? What if like I'm hurt worse than you're hurt? Yeah?
Neither of them have negligence because they're permitted to do what they're doing in Rishut Harabim.
They're permitted to do what they're doing. I'm permitted to walk in Rishut Harabim. I'm also permitted, presumably, to run in Rishut Harabim. If two people collide and they're both doing something permissible, there's no way of actually measuring the impact of that collision, let's say. There's no way of measuring how much I damaged you. There's no way of measuring how much you damaged me, okay? And given that we can't actually get down into the nitty-gritty here of how much damage I exactly caused you, and, most importantly, we were both doing something that we were allowed to do, they're both patur. Okay, that seems to be the most reasonable explanation here. Yes?
Except that, it could be that one of them was not paying much attention to what they were doing. Just a real life example, in my shul on Shabbos morning, there's a gang of little boys, and I am just waiting for one of them to knock me over when I have to put coffee in my hand. So far, we've avoided this. And they're not malicious, they're just totally...
But this doesn't say anything right now about negligence. Okay? It seems to be saying that we're allowed to do, right? They're patur. Why are they patur? They're patur because we have people who are doing what they're allowed to be doing, and we can't actually necessarily assess what the damage is. Yes?
But isn't there a little more, that they both have accepted the risk by being in the public space?
Good. Okay, excellent. Good. We'll take that too, right? If you're going to walk in the public space, if you're going to drive a car, let's say, you're accepting some kind of risk upon yourself. Okay, there we go. Seems like you're allowed to run in Rishut Harabim, you're allowed to walk in Rishut Harabim, and if you run into somebody, as long as we can't say that one person was incredibly negligent, in this situation, they're both going to be patur. Okay, let's keep going. That's the Mishnah. Here's the Gemara. The Gemara says the following. Matnitin delo ki'isi ben Yehuda. This Mishnah does not go according to the opinion of the Tana, Isi ben Yehuda. The Tanya, Isi ben Yehuda Omer, Ratz chayav mipnei shehu mishuneh. So Isi says, right, and again, this is a Braita, so it's a source of equal authority to the Mishnah that we just read. Isi says, the runner is chayav because the runner is actually doing something different. Okay, so he's challenging one of the two cases. If it's two people walking, right, or it's two people running, right, if they're doing the same action, we don't hold either one of them chayav. Okay? actually a case where one is walking and one is running, and they damage each other, we do hold the runner chayav mipnei shehu mishuneh, because that is different. So explain to me what he means. What's the logic of EC here? Yeah?
Is part of it, there are two things. I mean, I think the easy way of reading, the simpler way of reading it is saying most people are walking Rishon Rabim, they're not running Rishon Rabim, but part of me is thinking like, well, on account of that, people who are running, if you bump into someone when you're walking, that is less damaging than if you run into someone while you're running, and maybe there's just a higher chance of damage happening or more significant damage.
Okay, good. So the Mishuneh, I like both explanations, okay? The Mishuneh, I think the face value explanation of Ratz Chayav Mipnei Shehu Mishuneh is that the runner is doing something that is different. In other words, we've just changed our baseline expectation for Rishon HaRabim. When we read the Mishnah, what do we think? When we originally read the Mishnah, we said, what if I'm walking down Riverdale Avenue, what can I expect? I can expect there are going to be people who are walking, and I can expect that there are going to be people who are running, and either one, if I collide with somebody, okay, no fault, right? Now he's saying something totally different. He gives us an entirely different view of public space. What's his view of public space? What can I expect? I can walk. I should not have to expect people who are running. And if somebody runs into me, actually, they are, Lawrence used a word, right? They're negligent. They're doing the thing that's negligent, and therefore they are chayav. Right, Eliran, you're adding, actually, that the impact is actually greater because of that negligence, and then maybe that has something to do with the Mishnah here. Okay.
And we find that kids riding their bicycles on
all the time.
Correct. Correct. Okay, so that would be a situation, right? That would be a situation of, should we expect that? Maybe we should not expect that. That should be something that is Mishunah, right? Good. Okay. Now, Modeh Isi. So that's the statement of Isi, which clearly contradicts our Mishnah, right? We've got one contradiction here. The Mishnah basically says, one running, one walking, they run into each other, they're both patur. Isi says, no, actually, one running, one walking, they run into each other. We always hold the person who is running to be chayav, because that is not something that we should expect in Rishon HaRabim. Well, let's go with that explanation. For now, I think that's the most reasonable explanation of Isi here. Now, look at this. Umode Isi, be'er Shabbat bein hashmashot. But Isi agrees with our Mishnah that if it is Erev Shabbat bein hashmashot, right, it is right before Shabbat, shehu patur, that in that case the runner is patur. Why? Mipnei sheratz v'rshut. Because in that case the runner is running with permission. So explain the permission here for me. Yeah.
So it seems to me that both the Tanakama and Isi Ben Yehuda, Tanakama means the unnamed author of the Mishnah, whatever. Okay, they're not in the same Mishnah anyway. The author of the Mishnah and Isi Ben Yehuda do share, to use Amitai Etzioni's, they do share the communitarian philosophy. This is very un-American. We think of it as, we have individual rights, and you damage me, so I'm waiting. Of course, you have to pay me. That's not what's going on here. Here it's a different presupposition, which is there are societal standards. Now, the Mishnah, the man in the Mishnah, or whoever it is, says, look, everyone knows when you're in Rosh Hashanah, so that's the way, you take, Saul said, you take, this is what you expect. So if you get knocked over by someone, whatever, or damaged a little bit, that's the rules of the road, you expect that. Yisrael Yehuda said, no, there are, the communitarian standards are limitations to that. So he agrees with the unknown writer of the Mishnah.
Why is there?
And we see he agrees because of the way he said, I really agree with you, because yes, if it's right before Shabbat, everyone knows everyone is running around before Shabbat. So you actually should
so there you
accept that level of risk, but not on a regular, not on a different day or time.
Good. So you're giving one explanation, a particular understanding of what I want to focus on the language here, right? Modeh Isi be'er Shabbat bein hashmashot shu patur mipnei sheratz v'rshut. Okay, what is ratz v'rshut here? Running with permission. You're understanding the running with permission as meaning what can be expected. In other words, which totally goes along with every single thing we've said until this point. What have we said until this point? We've said, why would EC say that one runner and one walker, the runner is actually chayav? Because I should expect people to be walking. I should not expect people to be running in Rosh Hashanah. However, that situation is different on Friday afternoon. Why is that situation different on Friday afternoon? Because I can expect that people are running for preparation for Shabbat, or to, get to shul. Actually, we're really talking about Beit HaShmashot, or to, right? And so, one way of reading this, and we're going to go with this for now, and then we're going to totally change it a little later on based on some other things we're going to see. But one way of understanding this is that Mishuneh and Reshut are the opposites of each other. Okay? So Reshut is the opposite of Mishuneh. We understand that. It makes sense in the statement. Okay? In the statement of okay? You're running with permission. What does it mean to run with permission? It means that you're not chayav in the same way because there's a societal understanding that people are running before Shabbat. Okay. That opens up, I'm going to get to your comments in a second, that opens up a question as to, if I understand it in this way, as I can expect people to be running on Erev Shabbat, right? Erev Shabbat might not be the only exception, correct? It might be any time that I can expect people to be running. Okay, maybe there's like a big wedding in the town or something, right? And I can expect that people are running about making preparations, okay? And maybe in that situation, it's not something that's specific to Shabbat.
People are running to catch the last mincha.
Okay.
Destroying the whole town.
Okay, there you go. So that's one understanding, which I think is probably the most reasonable understanding of what EC actually meant here when he made this exception for Erev Shabbat. It has to do with what our communal expectations actually are. The problem with that explanation is what? What's the problem with that explanation? Yeah?
I hope this is the one you're thinking about.
There could be many problems. That's fine. Yes.
It seems to me like if you define Rishut in this way, like totally expected of you, like this is my expectation when I enter Rishut Rabbim, then it's not clear to me why, when I'm the one who gets hit, why I'm actually not the one who's liable here. If I knew that the person was running, and I know that people are engaging, maybe I have to adopt like an extra set of caution for myself to avoid those encounters.
Well, in this situation, right, if EC, I don't understand what you're saying, right, but EC is actually saying, like, you're saying it should be that maybe I should, if we know that that's expected, then everybody else should change their behavior accordingly, right? That's very interesting, right? We could have made a claim like that, right? I'm going to go for something much more simple than that, which is actually, what does Reshut actually mean? Reshut means permission, right? So permission is not necessarily, if I would just look at the words Mishuneh and Reshut, right? I would want EC to say, not they're running with permission, but it's expected, right? I want them to say it's expected. I wouldn't want to say they're running with permission, right? To say they're running with permission is a little, I still think it's probably the most reasonable explanation here, but that word Reshut kind of makes us think that maybe there's a different direction in which this is going to go, okay? Yes, and then I'll
I actually think that might be an answer to the question that was just asked. Because if you change that running is expected, then maybe there's a fault line or a negligence with the walker, right? Because the walker should have expected the runner and should have avoided it. But if it's the Reshut, then that answers the question, which is you have the permission to run, but if you run into somebody,
then that's when you're gonna.
They're not going to be responsible.
Right. So you have
permission
until a certain point. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. That makes sense. Mm-hmm.
I think we get back to the elevator
Mm-hmm.
and the two principles. He's actually arguing against himself because he now has a new criteria of time.
Yes.
And that time, be it Erev Shabbos or a wedding, is ambiguous. It's not a given time. And what if people have different perceptions of how much time they have to get to the wedding or how much time they have to get to home, being a shmushos? Mm-hmm. So what sounds like a rule and permission doesn't help anybody who's out there. It mitigates the rule.
Okay.
And you no longer can tell.
It might be too fuzzy. in this situation. Okay, it's possible. It's possible to think of it that way. Go ahead and then.
But like, Ben Hashmasha Erev Shabbos is a very specific period of time. It's not, I feel like people would know when that time is.
Yeah, I think the way that he says it is very specific, but I think your point as to like if this actually does apply to other situations in which it would be expected, which we don't know from here, but it is possible, right? It is possible to think of it as fussy. But you're correct about the Ben Hashmasha. Okay, one more comment that I want to go on. Yeah.
Another question that comes up is that if you understand it now as an expectation, that it's like who sets the expectations? Is it each subjective's expectations, and then how do we define that in the courtroom, or is it a general expectation now only on this specific time, or because if you want to broaden it? Or...
Correct. Saying Ben Hashmasha I can understand, right? That's defined. But saying it's like, there's something going on now. I should expect people to be doing this. That makes it much more fuzzy. If we broaden it, it makes it much more fuzzy.
Define, the conditions which
Correct.
is expected.
Correct. All right. One more comment. Then we'll go.
Two things. It's just two very quick things. Number one, not sure EC contradicts himself because I don't think it's clear at all that the Moda EC Arab Shabbos and Hashmasha Pater B'nei Shabbos Bereshus is part of the original Breita. Granted, it's in Hebrew, but
correct.
But
absolutely.
I'm not sure. And also,
it's totally unclear.
Very unclear. And I think, and also, I would also note that in terms of the literary structure, there's something very, very interesting going on with the word reshut. Reshut and reshut harabim. I would suggest, I'm not sure if there's anything going on here. I would suggest Moda Isi Be'er Shabbos Be'er Shmashos Shuv Pater B'nei Shuv Reshut. There's something going on with the transformation between the halachic status of Reshus harabim during the week and the halachic status of the Reshuyot during Shabbat. And Pater B'nei Shuv Reshut has to do something with the transformation of these Rishuyot on Shabbat.
Good, very good, excellent. Okay, we're gonna get to that through excavating some more sources. Good. Let's keep moving here. Thank you. All right. So we have this contradiction right now between sort of the baseline of the Mishnah and the baseline of Isi Ben Yehuda. Okay. Baseline of the Mishnah is actually you are allowed to run in Rishut Harabim, runner, walker, patur. Okay? Baseline of EC is the runner is chayav, unless it's a very particular situation, unless you can expect that people would be running. Here we go. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halacha ki EC ben Yehuda. So this is the Gemara now, quoting the Eretz Yisrael Amar Rabbi Yochanan, okay, who says, actually the halacha is like EC ben Yehuda. Okay, but this is going to be a problem. Why is this a problem? Umi amar Rabbi Yochanan hachi. Did Rabbi Yochanan actually say the halacha is like EC? V'amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha kistam Mishnah. We have a rule that Rabbi Yochanan says that in general the halacha follows the Stam Mishnah. Now it's going to quote the Stam Mishnah. It's not. Okay, wait a second. So actually, we have a sort of contradiction built upon a contradiction, right? First, we had a contradiction between the EC and the Mishnah, and now we're taking it up a level because we have two contradictory statements of Rabbi Yochanan. One says that the halacha is like EC in this case, in which case it is actually not okay to be running in Rishut Harabim. And the second statement is, no, the halacha always follows the Stam Mishnah, which is to say that you are actually allowed to be running in Rishut Harabim. So that's the contradiction that we have. Okay, what do we do with this? So this is an elevator contradiction, correct? We have two statements. They really contradict each other. One says you can run and it's fine, and the other says you actually can't run except for in one very particular situation. So this is where we have an Ukimta, and this is a moment where there's sort of fork in the road, and we can make a choice. So let's take a look at the choice that the Gemara makes here. Okay? Makes it very simple. It says the following. Matnitin be'erev Shabbat bein hashmasho. Actually, our Mishnah in this runner-walker case is talking about a situation in which it is erev Shabbat bein hashmasho. Okay, that's great. That's perfect. What have we just done? We just solved the problem, okay? What's the baseline halacha now? What's the baseline? What's the rule and what's the exception? Isi ben Yehuda is now the rule. What's the rule? The rule is, am I allowed to run in public space? Well, I'm allowed to, but if I do, I have to actually accept the consequences, okay? We've now said one runner, one walker, chayav, except for one very particular situation, which is Erev Shabbat bein hashmashot. Does that solve our problem? Yes, it solves our problem. Okay? However, that's kind of problematic, right? What's the obvious, if I think about like talking about this with, or talking about this with adults, but talking about this with kids, right? What's the problem?
It's not in the Mishnah.
It's not in the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah never says anything about like during the school day, after the school day. Clearly the Mishnah does not, we're talking about actually, we're privileging EC. And then in order to privilege EC, we have to say that EC is only taught, right, where you're only talking about one very specific point in time, which it clearly isn't talking about. Okay?
Wait a minute. This actually solves all the problems because, as was pointed out, now there's a principle, we have several principles in operation here, and they're all being activated. One is to minimize maflocat, major principle. And in this particular case, we now have, I don't know your name, I'm sorry. Shlomo. But Shlomo said, we have another principle that Baraita often explicates Mishnah, and that's what it's doing here. And as Shlomo brilliantly pointed out, the words of this, Gemara, Moge Isi Erev Shabbat, is this part of the Baraita or not? Now we understand. The Baraita itself is trying to explain EC because EC is the man, the unstated man of the Mishnah. He was unnamed in the Mishnah because Rabbeinu HaKadosh wanted to establish this as the halacha. Therefore, he did not name the Tana. That's what the Stam Mishnah is all about. And here, all the principles.
Good. So one way of explaining this is to actually say, yes, EC is actually the person behind this originally, right? And therefore, there's no problem. The Mishnah, really meant to say this the whole, right? If you go to sort of a traditional yeshiva, right? They will basically say, how will they explain this Ukimta? They'll say, we kind of lost the Masorah of what the Mishnah was actually speaking about. And actually, what are we doing here? We are reviving what it was actually speaking about. We're not reinterpreting anything. We are uncovering. Okay, we are uncovering the Masorah that was lost. This is the explanation of the Mishnah when Chazal bring this Ukimta. This is clearly what was originally meant. It just left out the words Erev Shabbat. And all we need to do is reinsert the words Erev Shabbat. I find that very unsatisfying. Okay? I find that very unsatisfying because it doesn't say Erev Shabbat. I'm just reading what I have on the page in front of me. It doesn't say Erev Shabbat. Okay? And so I want to understand more. Why are they actually trying? That is one approach, right? And why are they actually solving it in this way? And if we are saying that there is a decision being made here, they didn't have to solve it in this way. They could have they could have explained away easy. Okay? They didn't have to explain they're explaining away the Mishnah here. They're not explaining away easy. And so the first thing I want to point out to my students is that there's a choice here. We may or may not be able to explain the choice, right? But they are preferencing one side of this argument when they choose to say that we're redefining the Mishnah so that the Mishnah agrees with EC, not that we're redefining EC so that EC agrees with the Mishnah. There's a choice here. Now, what might undergird this choice? We might say, right, that Chazal had a very particular, in there, we could brainstorm all sorts of things right off the top of our head without having evidence for any of them. Okay, we could say, all right, maybe they just liked EC's opinion better. Maybe that's how they thought public space should function. Maybe they thought that people shouldn't be running in, right, those bicycles. People should not be on bicycles on sidewalks, okay? Maybe that was their view of public space, and EC's view made more sense to them at that point in time. We could say that, there's something historical here in terms of shifts in how people viewed public space. It wasn't just a personal opinion, but it was about how public space might have functioned in the time of the Tanaim versus in the time of the Stam of the Gemara. Okay, we could say, again, no evidence for any of this, but those are possible things that we could say. But the point that I want to make right now is actually that there is a choice here, and they are privileging EC, okay? And we're going to see if we can maybe get a little further in explaining why. Okay, there were a couple of people who had questions. Yeah?
Well, it's definitely easier, I think, to take EC's comment and make it the primary comment because EC, within EC's statement, already has a qualification. Like the common comment doesn't have any qualification, and then it's very easy to fit that in with already the pre-existing qualification of EC's statement.
Good. Okay, so you're right. From a rhetorical point of view, you know, you can further qualify something that's already qualified. A little bit. That makes sense to me. Yeah.
Does it undermine the importance of this? So if you want to suggest something like the reason the Gemara will do this is because it wants to use the principle laid out by EC with Meshuna and maybe Reshut as like a vehicle for some future or subsequent sugya, and so like we're not really using this for this per se, but like if we establish EC as the baseline for now, we can tinker with those principles for some future broader thing.
Yeah, Gemara doesn't do that all the time. Let's keep going. I think they're actually trying to do something like that here, and let's keep going with that. Okay, I'm gonna make a case that I think that's what's going on here, and you'll see if you buy my case or don't buy my case. Okay. Let's keep going. Until now, the point that I really want to make is just that there's an active choice involved here. Okay, here we go. And now what they're going to try and do is they're actually going to try and prove this Ukimta somewhat in the language of the Mishnah. Now, the Gemara does not always try and prove an Ukimta, okay? Very often the test of an Ukimta is whether or not it contradicts anything in the language. So, as long as it doesn't say Erev Shabbat or it's not Erev Shabbat, right, it will allow the Ukimta to stand. You can add words to a Mishnah, you just can't contradict words in the Mishnah. Here they're going to go a little bit further, really just because I think they can in this case. The proof is there, okay? So they say the following, Mimai, okay, Midikatani, Osha Yushneim Ratzim Turin, Hatu Lamalik. What the Gemara is saying now is actually there are two cases in the Mishnah and one of them is extraneous, okay? If I know that in the case of one running and one walking, that the runner is patur, I don't, going back to our original explanation of the Mishnah, right, our pre-EC explanation of the Mishnah, I don't actually also need to say that if two people are running, they're both patur. In other words, the obvious case is the two people running. Once I have the case of one running and one walking, and I know that the runner's patur, then I don't need the other case. So because I have both of these cases, it leads the Gemara to say, well, they're talking about two different situations. One is talking about Erev Shabbat, and one is talking about during the week. So that's the next line in the Gemara. El hachi kamar, echad ratz v'chad ma'alech patur, b'med zvarim emurim, b'erev Shabbat, b'erev shmasho. So understand it this way. Understand that when we say one is walking and one is running, that the runner is patur, that's Erev Shabbat Bein Hashmasho. The runner, walker, that case is Erev Shabbat Bein Hashmasho. Aval b'chol echad ratz v'echad mahalech chayav. And then it's adding that in, right? But if it's just one running and one walking and it's during the week, in that case it's chayav. And then go back to the case that's actually in the Mishnah. Shneihem ratzin afilu b'chol pturin. If they're both running, then even during the week, they would be patur. So what's going on here? They're trying to prove the Ukimta by saying, actually, if you look at the Mishnah carefully, it's clear that you don't need one of these cases. Enter the Ukimta of EC, the way the Gemara is reading this, to preference EC in its Ukimta, and then to say that that explains why we have these two separate cases. Okay, the Gemara does not always do this one has an Ukimta. It works out here to do this.
Question?
Yes.
Would it seem here that the Gemara is redefining both the Mishnah and the Braita, because they're saying, in the words of the Braita, EC did say Rotz Chayav. So the Gemara seems to be redefining EC now, as well as the Mishnah.
Because it's saying
Both
here,
are being redefined and coming again into a similar position.
it's not really changing EC's opinion here, though.
Because it seems like we're also redefining EC, because EC just said Rotz. The Gemara, this could be, perhaps, that's what I'm asking, could it be that EC also is being redefined?
Yeah, I hear your reading. I think I don't read it that way, but I understand what you're saying.
The reason why I'm saying this is because I'm working with the flow. With the Gemara. This is not an Ella here.
Right.
The Gemara is keeping with the idea that EC is the Tana of the Stam Mishnah. So that's why I'm proposing that
That's interesting.
both the statement of the Breita is also
Yeah,
being
that's interesting. That's interesting.
You can this both ways.
Yeah, I hear that. I think you could read it that way. I don't think you have to read it that way. Interesting.
Had it said Ella, then I would
That's interesting.
propose this. But
That's
it doesn't
interesting.
say. Just,
Yeah, that's interesting.
If you follow this interpretation, it explains EC,
Yeah.
right? But it really creates a whole new part to the Mishnah, right? Okay, so now
Correct.
we're covering the EC. Now all of a sudden,
Correct.
say, what do you see in the Mishnah that actually is the opposite of the way the Pshat reads?
Correct. We have now, deepened the problem even by explaining this,
Made it
which is
worse.
to say, yes, we've said, we've solved one problem, and we've created another, which is to say, like, go and try and read the Mishnah in a normal, clear read here. And now all of a sudden the Mishnah is jumping between cases without actually letting us know that it's jumping between cases, right? It's a much more difficult read of the Mishnah.
And by the way,
Right?
it's not such an insignificant difference, right, in the two things, the Mishnah. So for the Mishnah not to be addressing a completely different iteration,
Correct.
it actually, I would argue, does harm, because it creates confusion.
Correct. Okay? And again, it doesn't directly contradict. We have upheld all of the words of the Mishnah, right? We have not contradicted anything in the Mishnah. We have just added it. And it's a very, very difficult read. Okay. One of the things that I like to say to my students when I talk about Ukimta with them is, again, to this point that we can add words, but we can't take away. There's a very strong religious statement to be made here, which is, right, anyone following the Mishnah is not looking at the Mishnah and saying, I disagree with this, or I don't like your view of Rishon. Let's say that the Stam has a very different view of Rishon Harabim than the Mishnah had, and that's why they're privileging EC. Okay, can't prove that, let's say that for now, okay, because it's reasonable, all right? They're not saying, we have a different view. We actually don't think people should be running in Rishon Harabim. Let's cross off the Mishnah and excise it, right? They are saying this text is going to stay exactly the way this text is going to stay, and we are just going to add to the text in a way that allows our interpretation as well, affords for our interpretation as well, okay? I actually find that to be an incredibly moving, religious statement, right, of what they're doing. If you think about the mechanism, right, we're not crossing, we're not excising, we're not taking this out of the tradition. We are allowing the tradition enough flexibility to actually include whatever the modern sensibilities are. Okay, now that's dangerous, who gets the right to do that, all of those important questions, but I think it's actually just an interesting sort of, I just want us to be conscious of what that move actually means and what they're doing with Ukimta as a sort of writ large as a religious device. Yeah.
I'm not sure I would have thought of the Ukimta as being adding words. In other words, when it says I'm not thinking that it's saying the text is different. It's explaining the case as opposed to adding words.
Yeah, you're correct. You're not technically adding words, but you are actually adding. You're adding like a whole overlay of an interpretation that didn't exist.
But in other words, I'm not sure I would think of it as adding versus deleting.
Okay, that's fair. Meaning I perhaps stated it too radically. Fair.
But there's plenty of times, where the Gemara will use instead of the hachikama, maybe hachikatane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surah Metzora.
Yes.
And it's
The Surah Metzora, definitely. Yeah.
I didn't think that was what this
No,
was.
this is
Yes,
not this.
that's fair. That's more radical than this, I think, is your point. Okay, I wanna just looking at the time, I wanna see where the Gemara goes next with this. What the Gemara does now is the Gemara is returning to actually try and better understand this concept of reshut, which we laid out there and threw out some explanations, but it's going to go deeper. Amar Mar, so it's going back to what was said before. Umoda isi ber Shabbat bein hashmashot shehu patur mipnei sheratz bershut. Okay, what was the whole premise of EC statement? You are allowed to run on Erev Shabbat, right? Normally, you can't run Rishut Harabim. You're allowed to run on Erev Shabbat because you are running, to just define that, you are running with permission. We originally understood that running with permission as meaning it is expected. Rishut is the opposite of Mishuneh. The Gemara takes it in a totally different direction. What's the Gemara say? The Erev Shabbat, my Rishut Iga. Right? What kind of permission do I have on Erev Shabbat? Kids Rabbi Chanina. De Amar, and then it brings in the statement of Rabbi Chanina, which it didn't have to bring in. De Amar Rabbi Chanina, Ba'u v'neitzei l'krat kala malchita. Let us go out and greet the Shabbos queen. Okay, some of this is going to sound familiar because this is our source for l'chadodi. Okay, V'amrila, another version, l'krat Shabbat kala malchita. Right? Let us go out and greet the Shabbat kala malchita. And then we have examples of how Rabbi Yana, an example of how Rabbi Yana actually went out and literally greeted Shabbat. Rabbi Yana mitatef v'kai v'amar bo bichala, bo bichala. Rabbi Yana would wrap himself up in his tali and go out to greet the Shabbat queen. And that is the end of our sugya, and then we get to the next Mishnah. Okay, what is going on here at the end, right? And I think this is, with many, many sugyot, the end of the sugya informs sort of the value and how we understand it from the beginning. How do we just redefine Rishut? We're just totally taking this in a different direction. Yeah, Nava.
It's not exactly like with permission. It's like with honor, and like there's multiple people that like do this, and like it's seen that they're doing specific things for Shabbos.
Good. Okay, so it is permission, but it's a little more than permission also, right? What's the Rishut I have? It's not that it's expected that I'm going out for Shabbat. It's that because I need to honor Shabbat, okay? It's actually about Erev Shabbat itself. It's not about any other time when I can expect people to be in the Rishut Harabim. It's not before a wedding or whatever it is. It's that there's public, we have two different definitions of public space. We have the regular rules that govern public space all the time, okay? And then Erev Shabbat comes and public space is a totally different place, right? Because of this, I have a certain kind of reshut to do things differently in public space right before Shabbat for the honor of Shabbat. Okay, also very interesting is that, are they running?
No.
Okay, so these examples aren't necessarily even people running, which is even more interesting, okay? And what are they actually trying to do here, right? I think there's a religious value at the end of this sugya, I think, which helps us, and this is to your point, right? Which helps us understand why the Gemara might have preferenced easy, okay? Because what's this Gemara, where are we ending up at the end of this sugya here? We're ending up with a point that we want to make about how we're supposed to greet Shabbat, okay? And we're ending up with a point of saying the rules are totally different. Friday after, right, Rav Soloveitchik likes to talk about sort of the Erev Shabbat Jew, right? And the idea that it's not just Shabbos that's supposed to be special, but it's Erev Shabbos that's supposed to be special. That's the point that they're trying to make here, okay? And it's possible to think of this whole sugya, because of the way it ends, it didn't need to end this way at all. It's to think of the whole preferencing of Isi, of this Ukimta, is to say, where are we getting with this? The rules are different right before Shabbos. The rules are different, okay? We're actually trying to make a values point about how we're all supposed to greet Shabbos. And that's why we went with Isi, okay? It's one point. Looking at, I'm gonna hold the questions for a minute because I just want to look at two other things and then we'll have time. We have two antecedents to the sugya, which I think, in contrast, help make this point really clear.
So antecedents to the sugya, antecedents to the Mishnah.
To the Mishnah.
Tosefta.
Yeah, the Tosefta. Thank you. So. Yeah. So take a look. The Tosefta here. Well, the Tosefta and the Yerushalmi.
Yerushalmi's later.
Yeah. The Tosefta. Take a look at the Tosefta. Okay. The Tosefta says the following. Okay, so the same time period as the Mishnah, Tanaitic period. Shnayim shahayu mahalchim b'shut harabim. Just pay attention to what's different, right? Echad ratz v'echad mahalech Shnehem Ratzin, Shnehem Mahalchim, Shnehem Mashmashin. So all sorts of people who are going about and doing their thing in Rishon Harani. V'hizigu zeh et zeh. And they damage each other. Shnehem Pturim. They are both Patur. And then here, it's actually interesting, the Tosefta, as opposed to the Mishnah, right, actually gives us the explanation, right? Why are they both Patur? Right, same halacha as the Mishnah, by the way. Right, they're both Patur. Echad Ratz v'echad Mahalech is Patur. That's our case that we're interested in. Shelazer Shelahalech, Lezer Shelahalech. Okay? They both have permission. You're allowed to run in Rishon Harabim, and therefore, if you collide into somebody, both people are patur. Isi habavli omer, haratz chayav mipnei sheshineh. Okay, so the ratz is chayav because they did something different. Okay, so until now, pretty similar. All right. Umodeh isi habavli she'im haya erev Shabbat im chashecha patur. But Isi agrees that if it is Erev Shabbat, the runner is Patur. What's missing? Well, Erev Shabbat Yom Chashecha, you say it's the same as sort of Bein Shasha. What's missing is Mipnei Sheratz Reshut. Okay, and I think that's kind of the key here, right? Because the Reshut is what allows the Bavli to actually say, what kind of reshut do we have here? What's the reshut? It's sort of this permission of the mitzvah. They're talking about the permission of the mitzvah of actually going out and greeting Shabbos is what actually confers this different kind of responsibility. Okay? And I think if you just read the Tosefta is very clearly just about expectations. It's not about like all this religious point about Erev Shabbos and honoring Erev Shabbos and that ends up in our L'chadodi, right? That's not what's going on here. It's just about expectations. The Bavli is doing something very different. The Bavli is saying, I'm going to make this Ukimta, and I'm going to make it for a religious purpose. Let's get to the Yerushalmi, because the Yerushalmi does something very similar to the Tosefta. Okay, just another source. Yossi HaBavli Omer, right? This is more contemporaneous with the Bavli. Yossi HaBavli Omer, Hayavratz Reshut Harabim V'hizik Chayav Sheshina Haminha. Okay, so here we go. Isi, right? Isi, Yossi, same person, right? Why are you Chayav in Rishon Harabim in general? Because you are doing something different from expectations. And here he goes. Haya Erev Shabbat, Pina Shmasho, Patur. Does he explain why? No Mipnei Sheratz Reshut, none of that. Okay, and then it goes on to explain who Yossi Bavli, Yossi Ben Yehuda, Okay, so what I think is actually really interesting here is that we see these two other sources that kind of leave it at the level of expectation. We see the Bavli, and what does the Bavli do? The Bavli actually says, well, actually, takes it in a very religious kind of direction, right? Which is to try and make a values-based point about Erev Shabbat and how we should treat it. So when I look back and I ask those questions about, why are we making this Ukimta? And why are we trying to privilege the opinion of Isi? I think we can make a decent case, can't prove anything, but I think we can make a decent case that what's actually going on here is this is a values-based decision. Okay? And I'm using this as a values-based decision to make a point about Erev Shabbat. And the reason that I really love this example is because I think we can very easily run through these Ukimtas when we see them and just say, all right, it's random, they wanted it to be this way, they wanted it to be that way. But if we actually stop and pause and say, number one, what changes did Chazal actually make? Number two, what changes could they have made that they didn't make? In other words, they could have privileged the Mishnah and not privileged Isi. Okay? And if you look at the entirety of the sugya, might we be able to say that this is a values-based decision rather than a kind of random decision? I think very often we can start to understand it, right? I can't prove this, I can put this out there. I think the fact that Tosefta and the Yerushalmi help kind of make the case here. But my larger point is, very often we talk about, as a teacher, very often we talk about emunat chachamim, as in like, we have to believe everything that Chazal said because just handed to us from Har Sinai. I think it's a very different kind of emunat chachamim, and I think it's actually really a very powerful way of speaking about it, which is if I understand Chazal as making active, values-based decisions, that really helps me believe in the whole project of what they're trying to do. And that's really how I like to talk about Ukimta, right? That there are real values here that are undergirding the choices that Chazal are making. That is my point. Okay, go ahead.
So I think I might take a different view or disagree.
Go for it.
Because two things. One, they're not arguing by Erev Shabbat, right? The Mishnah, the Tanakama says you're pater. Everybody agrees you're pater Erev Shabbat. So by waiting Isi, you're not taking a position about Erev Shabbat. You're taking a position about every other time in Rosh Hashanah. That's where they argue. And so the Ukimta is making a judgment call about not Erev Shabbat. So I hear your point that Isi is distinguishing and making a point about Shabbat, but that's not what weighting him over the Chachamim is accomplishing.
Right.
The
And
result would be the same.
Right, correct. Meaning you're saying like the values-based piece here is actually about how we treat running in
Rosh Hashanah, because that's where they argue.
Correct. But that's where you have to look at sort of the flow of the sugya, right? And you're right, but the sugya could have ended, if the sugya had ended before the Erev Shabbat thing, right, I would have said, yes, that makes a lot of sense, and that's what they're actually trying to do. I think the fact that they're actually pushing the Erev Shabbat thing helps me understand the piece earlier.
I think it's making the statement you're arguing, which is Erev Shabbat is so important, and hence the conclusions of the story at the conclusion to say we're going to override our baseline rule. But I just don't think that explains the choice of the Ukimta of which side you're weighting.
I hear.
The other thing I'm struggling with, which is just a question, which is how do they make the Ukimta when you have the Tosefta where they are arguing in the Tosefta? Because clearly they disagree in the Tosefta. So until I saw the Tosefta, I would have said, okay, the Ukimta is an answer. But how do you make an Ukimta when it's clear that they're arguing?
Right, meaning the Tosefta just leaves it as
a
an argument, as a machloket.
Yeah. So
right, the Gemara does it all the time. They're just trying to harmonize. There's the...
also may not have had the Tosefta, right? It's clear that
That may be two different people, you're saying?
it's pretty clear that Yerushalmi had the Tosefta. It's unclear to what extent the Stam of the later redacted Gemara probably had the Tosefta right.
Right. And either way, right? There's just this predilection all the time to harmonize.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this might be a heretical suggestion, but could it very well be?
Don't take that personally.
The next shiur begins at 10:50, including 1 hour Zoom.
All right, we will allow for your heretical suggestion. Go ahead, yes.
Yeah, so just very quickly. Well, two. I guess these are two heretical things. So the first one is that Hilchos, the halachos of Rosh Hashanah seem to be very societally based. So it could very well be Isi is referred to as Isi al-Bavli. He's from Bavel. So it could very well be that the preference for Isi is because he's Babylonian, and this is the Babylonian Talmud. That's number one.
Correct.
Number two is that the pedagogical point, writ large, like this always bothered me as a kid also, right? The whole Ukimta thing. But what bothers me more is something that Solomon Maimon talks about in his autobiography. He goes through, he says why he went off the derech, and he gives 3 examples from the Gemara in increasing severity. The first one is how many white hairs does it take to invalidate a paratuma? Fine. Like you can explain that with longdus, like you can do whatever you want with that. The next one is like Ukimta. But the third one is, I think, like this, but on steroids, and it's much worse. And I've never understood it. It's what happens when there's Ukimta, and then the Gemara says, oh, Tani Nami Hachi, and like they produce out of thin air the exact breita that like they need that has that. that, to me, that's the real problem. And I've never understood that. Solomon Diamond went up there because of it.
The question of Brighto that they're saying, that we don't have any other correct. Okay, we're not going to solve that one right now. Thank you.